All right, let's take one last look at your traffic and weather for your ride in on this Wednesday morning. Not a whole lot going on around town as of right now. Couple accidents, one at Two Notch Road and I-20. Another one is out at Kaufman Road and Presley Street. And then one more is going to be at Leesburg Road at I-77 and Veterans Memorial Freeway. I'd say it's going to get around 71, currently in the mid-50s here in downtown Columbia on your Wednesday on the game. All right, 9 o'clock on your Wednesday morning. Welcome in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Felcher along with you here on your, as I just said, Wednesday on the game. Being able to talk about another baseball victory from last night. Is everything fixed, Jack? Are we good now? Is everybody calm now that baseball had a more impressive win last night?
I think some people are, but there's others that are going to be like, oh, it's Wofford. Is Wofford even supposed to be good this year? Like, I don't know. Look, it was a good game last night for South Carolina, for sure. Like, it served the exact purpose of what a midweek game can do for you, right? Because there's this belief out there for some reason that midweek games don't matter and that they really don't count against your schedule. I disagree. Like, okay, sure, if you lose a midweek game, not the end of the world, right? But I will say midweek games they serve such a great purpose in doing exactly what South Carolina did last night, in getting to use some different guys that maybe you wouldn't normally use in a SEC weekend setting. And also it allows you to really try some different things against, let's call it for what it is, lesser competition that you should be able to beat. And for the most part, that's what we saw last night.
Yeah, Gamecocks pick up the 8-2 victory last night over Wofford. And again, we'll see how good Wofford ends up being. It doesn't alleviate all the concerns, and we'll get into what Coach Maneri said, coming up in a minute here after the game last night. But it's better than coming in here and having talking about them losing a game, right? Like that was the concern coming away from the weekend was, where's the energy level going to be at? Is the fatigue going to still be a carryover from what happened on Saturday in the third game against Northern Kentucky? And thankfully, that didn't end up being a problem last night.
No, not at all. I mean, look, Saturday was a tough game for South Carolina for sure. They really could not buy a hit when it mattered most with runners in scoring position, went 0 for 7. And it was interesting. Maneri did talk about last night that the team did some sort of drill or something on Monday to work on runners in scoring position. And whatever they were doing, it worked for the most part last night. There wasn't a stat broadcast last night. It was called, I think, Sidearm. So it's like through Wofford or something. That's occasionally what you'll get with the stats for these mid-major schools when South Carolina has to go on the road for like a midweek game or whatever. But don't have the specific runners in scoring position stats from last night. However, it's clear that they were hitting the ball a lot better when there were men on base.
We actually do have those stats. We'll get to them coming up in a minute when we get into the stats that matter. But first, it is 9 o'clock, and as always, we must kick things off with our Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up.
Time to get hyped. Here's your 9 a.m. Sandstorm, sponsored by George Sink Injury Lawyers. Just call all nines.
It's time for your 9 a.m. Sandstorm Pick Me Up, brought to you by South Carolina's largest injury law firm, George Sink Injury Lawyers. If you've been hurt in the car or at work, call George Sink now at 803-ALL-9s. Again, last night, Gamecock baseball picking up the 8-2 win over Wofford up there in Spartanburg. That's a newer stadium, right? The Spartanburgers are a newer minor league team. What's it like for the in-stadium experience?
It's pretty cool. It's one of the, I don't even know, it might be the newest minor league ballpark. It opened last year. Spartanburgers are going into their second season there, and it's a cool stadium. There's nice little berm out in left field. You got nice seating all around. So it's a good time out there. The atmosphere was great last night for a midweek game in February. Really good crowd last night with South Carolina and Wofford fans there. And it's a pretty short drive getting there. It's about an hour, 15, hour 20. Like, I got home pretty quickly last night after the game. So not much to complain about there, and the product in the field ended up being pretty good.
I will say it was interesting last night because, of course, we had the game on our sister station, 98.5 WOMG, but if you watched the television broadcast, it was on ESPN+. I don't know who the two, broadcasters were that were doing the TV game last night, but they were kind of goofy. That's the best way I could describe it. They were definitely trying to have a shtick of shorts throughout the broadcast. Well,
the taller guy, the color guy, that's what's his face, Jack DeLong. I can't pronounce his last name. DeLongchamps. Mm-hmm. He's the pencil talk guy. He's the guy.
Oh, okay.
On social media or whatever. He works with it's like D1 baseball or 11.7. I can't remember which one he works with, but he was there broadcasting last night. I couldn't take him serious because he's got the pencil on the side of his head during the broadcast, but it is his shtick, so more power to him. But yeah, I listened to a little bit of the broadcast last night, but obviously wasn't anything special. So
yeah, it was just different because you get used to. I obviously can listen here with Derek and Stewart, but like the SC Network Plus. Dave Weinstein, Grayson Grinder does a lot of games, sometimes kickball night. So you can get kind of used to the same people calling baseball games. So when you have two different people that, again, were kind of going for something there with the way they were broadcasting the game, it was different. I'll say that much.
Yeah, for sure. As far as the product in the field last night, where do you want to start? With the pitching or the hitting?
Yeah,
because you go either way here.
Yeah, we'll start off with the pitching because I think for a lot of people in this fan base going into last night's game, we're probably sent into panic mode pretty quickly when on the second pitch, Ciccoli allows the solo home run. You think, oh, God, here we go. This is going to be a disaster type of thing. But to his credit, he settled in, did give a few more hits, but that was the only run that he allowed, had 4 strikeouts last night, and really kind of fell into a rhythm despite getting off to a little bit of a rocky start.
Yeah, so that first inning was a little bit tough just because after the home run there were a pair of infield singles on kind of, I don't want to say it definitely wasn't routine, but they were kind of like not weakly hit either, but like kind of in the middle, slowly hit ground balls towards KJ Scobie at shortstop. One was kind of directly to him. He charged it, and the throw was not in time. And then there was one where he had to backhand it to his right a little bit, make a throw across the diamond, and the guy was safe. That's going to happen. It's fine. He got out of it with a strikeout to end the inning, and then from there, Ciccoli was just great. This is what we had seen from him in the preseason. His last outing, I think he struck out 6 guys in a few innings. So to see him go out there last night and pitch really well, not a surprise at all. And he only got to 60-something pitches by the end of the 5th inning. And I asked Paul about that, how much did that length kind of help? Because over the weekend, you only had your starters go 4 innings. He honestly thought about sending him back out there for a 6th inning. I mean, he probably could have worked into the 8th maybe if it's a normal 100-pitch start. But since it's the first start of the year for Ciccoli, only 60-something pitches. So very good outing for him.
Yeah, the Scobie thing was interesting because that happened a couple times there in that first inning, then one more time there in the second where he didn't necessarily do anything wrong. It's just the throw wasn't getting there in time. And you'd have to give credit because those Wofford guys were getting down that first baseline pretty quickly. But yeah, that was it was odd that kept happening to Scobie, despite the fact that it looked like pretty routine plays, just not quite able to get the ball out fast enough to get those guys out at first.
Yeah, but besides that, really good game for him last night. He only gave up 2 more hits after that in his rest of the innings. And then I thought the bullpen pitched pretty well last night. Elijah Foster, Logan Prisco, those guys, not too bad last night.
Elijah Foster, I think, has become the most interesting pitcher on this team for me. Of course, coming over from Sacred Heart, because he started for them last year, right?
Yes.
And he's obviously going to be a bullpen arm for South Carolina this year. He is all over the place, man. He can throw some good stuff, but man, you can have one pitch that can go right down Main Street, and the next pitch may be 5 feet off the plate.
But
like he is very erratic, but he makes you watch. And I'm going to be very intrigued to see how he pans out here.
That's him though, right? That was his big issue at Sacred Heart, or just the walks were so high. But when he's in the zone and really on point, he can be really good. I mean, he throws about 95. So the stuff is there. I think it's just really up to, and I think people are going to roll their eyes at this, but it really is up to Terry Rooney and that staff to kind of really figure him out. And I think so far done a decent job. Overall, the pitching staff has looked much better and again, it's through 4 games, but we'll see what this team really looks like by the time we get to conference play. But I really like what I'm seeing with these arms. Even the guys that you may not use a ton of, they really are looking good so far.
Yeah, so again, overall solid night from a pitching standpoint. Again, you only give up that 1 run early in the game and then 1 more later on. So solid overall, and again, not really the area of concern. And hitting was a whole lot better last night as well. KJ Scobie stole the night, 4 of 5 at the plate, 3 RBIs, including one of those home runs as well. Pretty much the entire top of your lineup, with the exception of Dawson Harmon, hit the ball pretty solidly last night. That's where a bulk of your RBIs came from. Reynolds getting the start at second base for Logan Sutter, goes 1 for 5 with an RBI as well. So pretty good production up and down your starting 9 throughout the entire game last night.
They hit the ball a lot better last night. 10 hits, led to 8 runs. Now, let's preface, for the most part, until that 9th inning, South Carolina did benefit a little bit from some defensive miscues by Wofford. There was, on a Reynolds infield single, a really heads-up base running play by Aaron Jamison, who was on second with 2 outs, scored all the way from second on a ball that went up the middle, but play was made, throw to first, wasn't in time, and Jamison scored from second. And then you had, I think it was in the 7th inning, there was a long fly ball hit by Reese Moore down the left field line. Probably should have been caught. Went in and out of the glove. He reaches base. He then later scores on a infield hit. There were some weakly hit balls in that 7th inning. I think 2, one by Talmadge and then one by KJ. Then, ironically enough, in the 9th inning, both those guys hit just tanks into left field. So, overall, much better approach last night. And I think the bigger takeaway is that they didn't look tired last night.
Thankfully, that was the concerns. Like, man, you were tired after playing a doubleheader. Then what's a 90-minute bus ride, and playing what's going to be first of a back-to-back midweek, because you got Gardner Webb coming up today. Maybe we should be more concerned about the fatigue going today. I don't know, but yeah, that was good to see last night. And again, I think the panic meter kind of went up immediately when Wofford hits that home run to open the game. But after that, everything settled in, and you won how you kind of expect to win midweek games, hopefully in that 8-2 type of range.
Yeah, we're gonna see how they look when it comes to the back-to-back end of this doubleheader, or this back-to-back midweek schedule this week. But overall, really good game last night. Not much to complain about there. And, I mean, I think I almost wanted to ask Paul last night, like, did the guys kind of, like, take the whole being tired thing as, like, a challenge? And hopefully it does motivate them, quite honestly, to perform a lot better like they did last night. Because if they play like that moving forward, they're going to potentially have a nice year. But, again, it's 4 games into the year. It's Wofford. Not going to make a bigger deal about it than it is, but it was certainly a nice performance last night.
We'll get into the stats that matter from last night, as well as what Paul Maneri had to say post-game coming up next. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Feltry on your Wednesday here on The Game.
If you're a small business owner, a church, or other entity in need of a new HVAC system, AAA Heating and Air has exciting news for you. AAA now offers financing to qualified organizations to aid them in installing a new light commercial HVAC system. It's as easy as calling AAA Heating and Air for a quote or finding them online at callAAAtoday.com. Tell them Jack from 107.5 The Game sent you on. Over at AAA Heating and Air, they've got your back. They're offering up to 12-month payment plans on repairs with no credit check required. That's right. No need to worry about your credit score. As long as you're a homeowner with a valid bank account, you'll be good to go. Take control of your comfort today by giving a call to AAA Heating and Air at 803-677-1500. Again, the number to call AAA Heating and Air is 803-677-1500. Give them a call today and breathe easy again.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Belcher with you here on your Wednesday on the Game, talking Gamecock baseball. They're back in action once again today, taking on Gardner Webb. First pitch at 4 o'clock over at Founders Park. Pregame coverage starting here on 107.5 The Game at 3:45. And as I introduced yesterday, we're going to talk about the stats that matter after each baseball game in terms of a couple key areas that I think kind of tell the story of how successful or unsuccessful Gamecock baseball is going to be throughout this season. Of course, the stat that really stood out over the weekend was how dismal this team was with runners in scoring position against Northern Kentucky. 4 of 30 throughout the entire weekend in the series that they won 2 out of 3 games. If you want to take a guess, Jack, because, again, our usual stats that assist us were not available last night on Stat Broadcast. If you had to guess what they were with runners in scoring position, what would you think?
I'm trying to think. This is going to be so wrong. I'm going to go with, like, I don't know, like 4 for 14.
Not too far off. And by the way, Terry helped me calculate this earlier because when you have to do it manually, it's
you did
it's
it
not
manually.
easy.
Okay.
Yeah,
I know it's so annoying how those stats just didn't have.
Yeah, whatever their website was, and you're right. Some of those midweek games do kind of throw you to some of those different type of websites that don't give you all this stuff that we usually have at our disposal. So yes, Terry and I counted this stuff up ourselves about an hour ago. 5 for 11 actually. So they were 5 for 11.
That's really good
with runners in scoring position based on our calculations, which is obviously a lot better. You had more hits with runners in scoring position last night than you did through the entire weekend against Northern Kentucky. So that's a thumbs up.
Do we have the cut of Paul talking about what? Because I mentioned it in the last segment. They did something with runners in scoring position, but I think it'd be good to hear, if we have the cut, of course, what he had to say.
Yeah, I believe it'll be within this cut number 3 here of him talking about the offense being a whole lot better last night. Here's what he had to say.
Wow, I thought it was, we worked so hard yesterday at practice with challenging the hitters, and we had a pretty good drill that we worked on yesterday for having players hitting with the guys in scoring position, and we put a lot of pressure on them. And I thought they responded well in the drill yesterday, and then I tell you, we hit an awful lot of balls hard, I thought, with guys in scoring position tonight, and it was really great to see. A couple of the outs, like Lizama's line drive and even Harmon's hard ground ball to second base with 2 outs, and, they hit those balls hard. Once the ball leaves the bat, you can't control what happens unless you've hit it over the fence, So if it's caught or it's right at somebody or they make a great play, you got to be proud of yourself, because if you hit balls hard, and especially with runners in scoring position, low line drives instead of lazy, easy fly balls or weak ground balls, then sooner or later they're going to fall for you, and that happened for us tonight. I was really, really proud of the guys. And even though Scobies wasn't with the guy on base, for him to deal with what happened the other day, the way the game ended, and, I was worried about him. He might be tripping over his lip a little bit, pouting and, feeling sorry for himself. But he didn't. He played a really solid game tonight and then hit that home run at the end. So, you can't do anything about the past. All you can do is go forward. And I think Scobie showed a lot of character tonight.
Real quick, one of my favorite things about the midweek games, especially ones that aren't at Founders Park, is the on-field interviews as there's music playing in the background while the field's being cleaned up. Like, it's those weird little quirky things that I enjoy about baseball season.
Yeah, I was kind of worried that the audio was not going to sound good last night because it's on the field, man, and it's like this every time. It's either there's going to be loud music blasting for whatever reason when there's no one in the ballpark, or you're going to have leaf blower going.
Leaf blower guy, one of my favorites. The funny thing, again, we'll get back into what Maneri said in a second, Coach Kingston would not raise his voice when leaf blower guy was behind him.
He would not.
So he'd just keep talking that same level, and you just lose half of the comment because the leaf blower is going off. Like, at least for Maneri, like, raise your voice a little bit when that kind of stuff's happening. But no, you did a good job with the audio last night. Appreciate that, because you don't have the formal, like, sit-down press conference when you're on the road, especially during the midweek, for South Carolina baseball. But he's right. When you hit the ball hard, when you put the ball in play, you're going to give yourself opportunities. They did it last night, did that very well. So, again, 5 of 11 with runners in scoring position, 7 of 20. Again, this is based on mine and Terry's calculations with runners on base, which was almost as many hits as you had the entire weekend against Northern Kentucky. They were 10 for 47 with runners on base in those 3 games. Only struck out 7 times. Still a little high. So
7's not bad.
It's not terrible. It's not 10 like the other day.
If you reach double digits, that's bad. But 7 times, and also where are those strikeouts coming from in the order? That's the other thing. I mean, I think most of those guys last night were putting the ball in play, which is, especially at the top of the order, that's good to see.
Yeah, it was good to see there. So there's your stats for the offensive side of things. Pitching-wise, 7 total strikeouts between the guys on the mound, only 4 free passes, 2 hit batters, 2 walks, only gave up 1 extra base hit, which was that home run to open the game. And I don't believe Carolina had any errors in the field last night, unless I'm forgetting one.
No, I don't think they did. It was Wofford making all the mistakes yesterday, and that's the other thing. They've played, for the most part, relatively clean baseball all around. They made a few errors over the weekend. KJ had a pair of errors, and Evans obviously had that one that kind of cost South Carolina on Saturday. But last night was a much better defensive performance.
And, of course, one of the concerns going into last night was the question about energy and fatigue, given what happened on Saturday in Game 3 against Northern Kentucky. That is something else that Palmineri addressed after the game as well.
Well, I told them, we're going to enjoy this drive home, and then we're going to turn the page. I'm not making excuses for them anymore. It's not going to be because they're tired. We need to go out tomorrow night and play with a lot of energy and enthusiasm. I was just really, I was disappointed. We had such a nice crowd at the game Saturday, and they were just waiting to have fun and explode, and we just never gave them a reason to. And I never used the word embarrassed. I'm not embarrassed because, it just happens sometimes. But we got to get some adrenaline and realize that each day is a new day. And we didn't turn the page quickly enough from last Friday night to Saturday. And I'm pretty confident that tomorrow will be different.
Last night doesn't alleviate this concern for me, or I think anybody, because it's a long season. And, again, you ran into those problems after only 2 days against Northern Kentucky. So it was good to see last night that they came out with good energy and obviously played really well. Again, how are they going to look tonight? How are they going to go into another weekend series this weekend? I think that's going to be the next set of tests. And okay, was that just a one-week anomaly, or is this going to be something that's going to be a consistent problem this year?
More like a one-game anomaly.
One-game anomaly.
Hopefully, yeah. I mean, we'll see. Look, tonight is going to be a real good indicator of how these guys do on a back-to-back. And here's the thing. They play back-to-back every weekend. So it's not like, midweeks, you're typically only playing one midweek game every week. I think there's this week, and then there's another week at some point, I think in like March, where South Carolina is going to have 2 midweek games on Tuesday and Wednesday. But besides that, it's only one midweek game. This week's going to be interesting, though, because of the 2, yesterday and today. And then you're playing the service academies this weekend. And those guys are going to, The SEC schedule is tough, but from a pure competitive standpoint of you need to play good baseball for all 9 innings, you're going to have to do that against the service academies this weekend. Like Army, Navy, and Air Force, those guys are just built different in a much different sense of the training that they do and everything. And I'm sure there's going to be a no-nonsense, no shenanigans type of effort they're going to put out there on the field this weekend when they come to Columbia. So South Carolina really has to be on its A game. And I will say, you're off to a 1-0 start this week. It would be a real nice shot in the arm to go 5-0 this week. I get it. It's Wofford, Gardner-Webb, and then Army, Navy, and Air Force. I get that. But I still think that would be a real nice accomplishment after what happened on Saturday. To bounce back, go 5-0 in a 5-game, 6-day stretch, I think that'd be really good for this team.
Again, Gardner-Webb tonight, 4 o'clock, or this afternoon, rather, 4 o'clock here on 107.5. The game pregame coverage starting at 3:45. This is a Gardner-Webb team that has been putting up a lot of runs. They took 3 out of 4 against Valparaiso over the weekend, scoring 36 total runs over the course of those 4 games. So watch out. It could be a team that could give you some trouble on the base paths tonight.
Yeah, that's going to be something. South Carolina hasn't really been tested yet on the base paths with the catching. That is something that I think has been an underlying concern. Probably not talked about as much as everything else. Talmadge Lecroy's looked good behind the plate so far, I think. But to be fair, South Carolina hasn't really faced a team yet that has run wild on the bases. And we'll see if Talmadge is even catching tonight. I know Paul mentioned he might want to get Talmadge off his feet. And he does potentially want to catch Reese Moore. But we'll see. We'll see what they do tonight. But that is definitely something to keep an eye on.
Do we make anything of Reynolds starting at second base last night? Was that just for the midweek? Or is that like, hey, Sutter didn't perform well enough at the plate this weekend, we need to make a change?
I think it's giving another guy an opportunity because Sutter just hasn't performed at all. He didn't have a hit this past weekend. And he's going to get more opportunities moving forward. He has to, because at some point he's going to break out of this slump that he's been on since he's come to South Carolina. He's too good of a hitter not to. But if he's not going to hit, you got to give other guys an opportunity. And I'll be interested to see who starts tonight. I personally would just continue to ride with Reynolds or start Eric Parker tonight, because Sutter's really not doing much good for you right now.
We'll see what happens tonight, and obviously talk about that coming up tomorrow. Men's basketball also in action last night. What happened down in Florida? We'll discuss that, as well as the future of this program and who might be the coach next season. We'll talk about that next. It is the Extra Points. Howard Head and Jack Feltry along with you here on your Wednesday on the Game.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to downplay this. This is also a team that's playing as well or certainly better than anybody in our league. As we're winding the season down, they know what postseason play and advancement looks like. They have expectations, and so they're not on their court certainly going to come out and be flat.
Yeah.
There was no flatness to them. This was our guys playing. I mean, our guys played and competed.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Points Hour. Head and Jack Feltree along with you here on your Wednesday on the Game. That, of course, the voice of Lamont Paris, head men's basketball coach. Last night, after the Gamecocks fall 76-62 on the road at Florida, that gives the Gators the season sweep of South Carolina after beating them by 47 when they came to Columbia a couple of weeks ago. Lamont Paris there talking, and that was kind of the main theme of his conversation with Derek and Casey after the game, was being more competitive against Florida than they were the last time. If you're looking for silver linings, okay, sure, I guess. But, again, I think that kind of speaks volumes to where we're at right now with this men's basketball season that we're having to talk about. Well, you lost, but you didn't lose as bad as you did against this team last time. So there's something to be said about that, I guess.
I can't believe that. I honestly, they lost. Like, that's all that matters. They lost by 14 points. Who cares if they lose by 1 or 100 or whatever, or like 50 like they did against Florida the first time? They lost the game, and they've lost 7 straight. And quite honestly, man, I don't know if they're winning another game. Like, I did not think it could get worse after last season, but I think it has. And great, they had better effort last night. That's fine. Didn't make a difference, though. They still did not play well enough to win the game, which is the ultimate objective at the end of the day. And they have not accomplished that for what feels like forever at this point.
Yeah, I mean, they got it down to 6 with about a minute to go in the first half. Florida had a couple quick scores late, including off a Michi turnover that made it a 10-point game at half. And then from there, Florida kind of managed 10 to 15-point gap, got it up to about 20-plus with a couple minutes to go. Carolina scored a couple late to make that score look a little bit better than it actually was. But again, we're just riding this out to the end of the season, man. There's only a few more weeks to go until decisions have to be made. I think if you poll a lot of this fan base, a lot of them think that there's going to be a different person in charge as the head coach coming up next year. I don't know if that's a slam dunk for sure or not. I'm not saying I agree one way or the other, but I wouldn't say with utmost certainty that Lamont Paris is definitely gone, if you know what I mean.
I'll keep harping on what I've been saying, like, since I think yesterday. Like, I was even telling, I had a fan asking me last night at the game, you know, what's going to happen with LP, and honestly, I don't know exactly, but like, I'll just the facts are. Is a $12 million buyout. Mm-hmm. That's one part of the equation here. The next step is you got to fire the staff. Don't know exactly how much those guys are making, but it's going to tack on a couple, more dollars for sure. Then you got to hire a new coach, and not sure what that would cost. Would you get a mid-major coach? Do you get a sitting head coach at another school? I mean, you got a lot of directions to go here. And then you also have to invest more in the basketball program. That's a lot of money right there. And that's probably taking you to about $20 million. Is South Carolina willing to do all that for a sport that, sure, it is one of the few sports here at South Carolina, that and football, that are profitable, but is it really worth investing that much money into a program that has not given you any reason to invest into them? I don't know. The other thing I will say, though, is if you're not going to do that, if you're not willing to pay the buyout for LP, the buyout only drops, I believe, down to $10 million next year. Why not just give him the difference of that? What is it, like $2 million difference right there? Mm-hmm. Give it to him for his that you would have used for his buyout. Put it towards the NIL budget, increase it a little bit more, and be like, okay, like this is what we're giving you, and you have to figure it out. Otherwise, we're moving on after next year. Like, $12 million, $10 million doesn't make a huge difference, but I think if you're not going to fire him this year, just give him the difference of that money and let him go to work and try to really build this roster a lot better. But honestly, I don't have a ton of confidence in that because the last 2 years, the roster construction just hasn't been there. And I don't know what needs to change. We're in a landscape now where we're seeing general managers, and I don't know how many GMs there are in college basketball, but I think there needs to be somebody else. LP is a good coach, I think. I think he's kind of gotten, I don't want to say he's been dealt a bad hand, but like this is his roster after all. But I think he's a better coach than what we're seeing on the court right now. But I think there needs to be someone else in there that knows how to put a roster together, because quite frankly, it just hasn't worked for the last 2 years.
Well, and this comes to my question of the day, and I want y'all to weigh in on the Firehouse Subs text line at 803-404-6100. If Jeremiah Donati came out today, he's not going to, but let's say he did. Let's say he came out today and said Lamont Paris is going to return as the men's basketball coach for next year, but I'm going to guarantee you he's going to get like $12 million in NIL to work with. That's not the highest end. Again, you've got teams like Kentucky and the SEC spending around $20 million, but it's a whole lot more than what you've had to work with. How'd you feel about that? Would you have confidence in Lamont Paris going out and building a team with even more resources, or are you looking at this as more of a coaching problem, not a resource problem? There's no wrong answer here. I'm just interested to know your thoughts. Again, 803-404-6100. And I keep looping back to this, and maybe this is something that Donati is looking at and considering whether to make a move or not. He did make the tournament. Now, I know that was 3 seasons ago now, 2 years ago now, 3 seasons ago now, however you want to look at it. But he didn't have a lot of resources then, right? We know that, like last season, their resources were at the bottom of the SEC. I can't imagine that 2024 tournament team was all that much different, and they still put together a team good enough to make the tournament. So is it the lack of talent evaluation? Is it not having resources? Like, what is the problem with why this men's basketball team isn't having success consistently? And if you did guarantee Lamont Paris more resources, could he do something with it? I think is the golden question here.
The thing is, though, is it almost fair to ask, like, did they get lucky in the tournament season?
Maybe they did.
With the roster they put together. Like, it was just the perfect storm of, like, I really can't think of a player that they added from the transfer portal that stunk that year. Like, everyone they got was pretty good, honestly. And that was coming off a year where you were downright terrible in Lamont's first season. And Lamont was the SEC coach of the year. So I think for that reason also, because that's another part of why I think he's a good coach. It just has not worked the last 2 years. But it's like he's the one putting together this roster. That's the tricky thing about this, is that I think he's a good coach, but maybe he's just a good mid-major type of coach, because this kind of feels like a mid-major roster construction, kind of, to some degree. The problem is that your big men that you brought in to replace CMB and Nick Pringle are Kreese DeSandico, Norton Kapich. You return Jordan Butler. What have those guys done for you? I mean, DeSandico scored 6 points last night. Kapich played 12 minutes, like, for the first time forever, and didn't do anything offensively. I mean, that's nowhere near the production you got out of your bigs last year. And I think we've seen it exposed in literally just about every single game, that if an opponent has decent enough big men to go out there and be a force to be reckoned with inside the paint, they're going to destroy South Carolina. And that's what we've seen for the better part of this entire SEC play.
Again, let us know your thoughts, 803-404-6100. If Lamont Paris is coming back, but he's guaranteed more resources, how would you feel about that? We'll hit some of that as we wrap up the hour. Coming up next, it is The Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry here on The Game. All right, welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Belcher wrapping up hour number 1 here on your Wednesday on the game. I posed the question at the end of that last segment. If Lamont Paris was guaranteed to come back next year, but was promised a lot more resources, let's say in the $12 million range, how'd you feel about it? And we want to know your thoughts at 803-404-6100. Nameless texter simply asked the question of why is South Carolina being cheap in the first place? Well, there's only so much money to go around. Carolina's not a program that's flush with cash.
No.
Right? You don't have Phil Knight writing you checks left and right. Like, you do have to be very strategic if you're South Carolina and Donati and the Garnet Trust and all of them about how you allocate these resources. So it's not as simple as saying, if in the case of if you wanted to fire Lamont Paris, yeah, let's just write him a check for $12 million for his buyout. Or is it something along the lines of, all right, we'll just go out there and find $12 million for him to spend in NIL. Like, it's not that simple. You have to be careful about how you allocate those resources. And unfortunately, it seems like men's basketball just hasn't quite felt the trickle down that they need to be consistently successful.
Like, I think there's some fans out there that want LP fired. They want Paul Mainieri fired. And maybe also somewhere along the lines, I don't think this is everybody, but there's probably some people that also wanted Shane Beamer fired after last season. That's a lot of money, and it's probably not the money that South Carolina has to work with to fire all 3 coaches. I don't think that's realistic. So, look, here's the way to look at it. Do you fire the coach that is a $12 million buyout, or do you fire the coach that has a $4 million buyout? If you wisely picked the $4 million buyout because it's the smaller one much easier to move on from, that would be Paul Mainieri. So we'll see what kind of season baseball has. I think it's a lot more conceivable for Donati to move on from Mainieri if South Carolina has another abysmal baseball season, because number one, he's a lot older. This is his last job, and last season was really rough. And if you have another year like that, you move on, right? It's a lot easier to move on with $4 million. The other side of it is, I mean, again, it's $12 million buyout. It's not, unless somebody is out there going to donate $12 million to get the buyout, completed, then I don't know, but we'll see. I mean, I think it's just not as easy as saying, yeah, let's just fire the basketball coach, the baseball coach, and everybody. Like, let's make all these moves in one go. It's just not realistic.
Yeah, I have a couple people here asking about the, $70 to $75 million payout that all the schools in the SEC got. Not all that money goes back towards coaching contracts, NIL, those kind of things, and I can't even begin to tell you all the avenues that in different places that would go, but not all that is guaranteed to trickle back down specifically to the sports for contracts and NIL and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no way. That's going to get, I would think it gets spread out over a lot of different avenues, some probably not even including sports. But, yeah, it's not going to go towards the coaching buyouts. Like,
some of it can.
Some of it can, but
I don't even know if we'd have the public figures on how South Carolina splits up that money.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I don't know. It's a combination of having the right coach and having the right resources. So, you don't have the right resources, at least not as of right now. Do you have the right coach? Like, could Lamont Paris be more successful given more resources? That's the risk you're taking if you do bring him back for another year, saying, all right, we believe in you as a coach. We're going to give you the resources, and we're going to see what happens. And then if it still is another bad season, you're right back here at square one this time next year.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not moving on from him this year and they have another bad season next year has to be the year to move on from him. Can it be better than what it is right now? That's kind of my question. Like, who are you going to hire, number one? Because the other thing to think about here that we haven't even really discussed, Tyler, is that South Carolina is not an appealing job. I think we maybe talked about that tier list from a few weeks ago. On3 posted it, or no, Field of 68 posted it, and South Carolina is viewed as the worst job in the SEC. 100%. Like, it might be one of the worst jobs in college basketball. You're really going to sell somebody on coming here to South Carolina when there are likely better jobs out there? I mean, I don't know. It's a tough sell, I think.
And you're going to be this offseason in particular likely going up against two other jobs in the SEC with Oklahoma and LSU, and a very good possibility they could be moving on from their head coaches as well. So then you suddenly become the third option in the SEC. Now you're debatable when it comes to you and LSU, but Oklahoma definitely gives more resources to their men's basketball program than what Carolina does. So that seemingly would be a more attractive job if you're competing with them, obviously. And not to mention all the other jobs going on around the country. Kansas State obviously just came open with the firing of Jerome Tang, and we'll see how all that ends up playing out in terms of the courts and all that kind of stuff. But, you're not an overly desirable job. No. So you're maybe, and I'm not saying I agree with this or not, but the best course of action in Donati's mind may be to retain Lamont Paris, try and give him more things to work with, and see what happens.
Yeah, I think that is a realistic possibility here. I would not rule it out. I mean, I think, has he earned the opportunity to come back? Maybe, but I don't think so. I mean, that's kind of irrelevant to this whole thing when you're looking at it from a financial standpoint. That is the only question here, I think, really, is does it make sense? And I don't think that's right. I don't think that's right. It should not just be about the financial figures, but that's the reality we're in, is that this is not there's not money coming down from trees, right? There's not until there is a major shift in the amount of money that's coming in for athletics at South Carolina. I don't think it's as easy as just saying, yeah, we're just going to fire the coach. Who cares what the buyout is? It's not that simple. You got to be really, like you said at the beginning here, Tyler, you have to be really strategic about it.
Yeah, and look, I don't know what's going on inside Jeremiah Donati's mind. I'm sure he's got a lot of things that he's considering as of right now, but I mean, we have to explore the realistic possibility that Lamont Paris is coming back. So if he does come back, you say, okay, how do you make this different, and how do you give him more to work with? Again, it's easier said than done, but that is something that's on the table unless, we see them go the other way and move on from him at the end of the season.
Yeah, he probably does not deserve to come back, because it's going to be 3 out of the last 4 years that South Carolina is going to be towards the bottom of the SEC, have a losing record. Heck, they could end up losing 20 games this year. That'd be 3 seasons of that happening. That's just not good, man. And I don't know what the solution is. If you keep him, what is the solution? Because how do you ensure that things are going to work out and you have a better roster built heading into next year? I think honestly, a lot of it seriously is just luck. Because you're taking a flyer on a lot of these guys. You're hoping they're going to be good. And I'm sure heading back to last summer, I think a lot of people were excited about some of the moves that South Carolina made, because on paper, they got more three-point shooters to help figure out an issue that they had last year, because they couldn't shoot much worth at all. But the problem is they've been arguably worse this year, and that's just sometimes the way it goes.
Only a handful more games to go in SEC regular season, and we'll see what decisions get made when the season does ultimately come to an end. But for now, Lamont Paris is still your men's basketball coach. It's never too early to look at bowl projections. We'll look at what Brett McMurphy has to say about where Carolina is going to be at the end of this football season. Coming up next, it is The Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Veltri here in the game. Oh, Tyler Head here. Always excited to tell you about our friends over at Twin Peaks. As we get set for another full week and weekend of sports. There's only one place taking all that great action, and that's with our friends over at Twin Peaks. TVs as far as the eye can see, no matter what sport you want to take in. Now that we've got college baseball rolling, basketball, both professional and college, hockey, we've got the Olympics still going on. You can take in everything and more with our friends over at Twin Peaks. Pull up a bar stool, order some delicious scratch-made food from their kitchen, and, of course, don't forget about those 29-degree draft beers. All this and more, whatever your sports preference is, with our friends over at Twin Peaks. If you're here in Columbia, right down the street in the Vista. All right, welcome back in. Hour number 2. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Belcher along with you here on your Wednesday on the game. Took my first sip of caffeine during the break there, so I am juiced and ready to go.
Well, that's good.
It's necessary. Yeah, especially as you get into the middle of the week. I know we've only been here for 2 days this week, but I was so tired yesterday just watching the baseball game. I couldn't keep my eyes open, so I knew today was going to be a struggle. So, yes, caffeine's in me. We're good to go as we roll into hour number 2. Appreciate a lot of you that have been weighing in on the Firehouse Subs text line for the question I asked in the last hour in reference to, hey, if you promise Lamont Paris is going to, if they said Lamont Paris is coming back for another year and you promised him more resources, is that something that you're okay with? And Nameless Texter here says, are we asking an impossible task of any coach? Like, what are the odds that you find a coach who can do what you're asking? You're essentially asking for a miracle unless you spend more on the roster. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I mean, look, I don't know what I think if you ask the majority of fans, you just cut them loose, right? At the end of the year, right? I think that is definitely what the fan base wants to see, but that's just not. I don't know if that's going to be the answer because they got this. It's like it sounds so simple, but then you got this dark cloud hanging over your head. And look, we talked about him yesterday. I think kind of all goes back to Ray Tanner and some of the decisions he made. Now, in hindsight, I think this is also another question to probably ask on the text line. Like if you're going back to that SEC tournament in 2024. Where Ray Tanner gives Lamont Paris an extension. Would you have given him an extension at that time after the season that he had and the fact that Ohio State was trying to, bring him in to be their head coach? I mean, there were a lot of factors into, you can see why he was given the extension.
Yeah, no, it made perfect sense at the time.
Yes, but it's had a lot of drawbacks since then.
Yeah, because hindsight's being 2020. Let's say you don't give him the extension then. He goes back home, goes to Ohio State, and let's say he's taken them to the tournament, and South Carolina basketball has had the exact same past 2 years they've had with some different head coach. Then you're saying, oh, man, why didn't we go out there and pay Lamont Paris 2 seasons ago? At the time, it made sense. You were trying to hang on to a guy that, had just seemingly proven himself in the toughest conference in men's basketball by fielding a very competitive team with probably very limited resources that season as well. Now, again, it hasn't aged very well in the 2 seasons since, but at the time, again, there's a reason he was in the running for SEC. The reason he made SEC Coach of the Year that year, nearly won the conference regular season. Again, that's now put you in a tough pickle because of how high the buyout is, but at the time, it made sense.
It did make a lot of sense, and it's just an unfortunate situation that this program's in. Like, if you told me after the tournament season that they would stoop down to this level over the next 2 years, I wouldn't believe you. I would have thought, okay, South Carolina is going to do something with that momentum. But I think for the fans that have watched this program for a long time, they go back to 2017 where South Carolina makes the Final Four. And if South Carolina couldn't make the tournament in the years after that and do anything with that and then would fire their coach a few years later, then I don't think anything's off the table in terms of like what they have done in the years since they made the tournament.
Well, and I think it's also important to point out the level of expectation here is not insanely high, right? Like you come to South Carolina, you don't have to, take the team to the Final Four, right? Great if you do, and we have saw Frank Martin do that over a decade ago, but this is a fan base that just desires consistency, right? Because, and Bill and Jay and all them can tell you from their life experience, they've not seen a ton of great things from men's basketball really over their entire lifetime. So if you can just come in here and be competitive, you can put yourself in the tournament conversation consistently and you make it 3 out of 5 years, that's really, for all things considered, solid for this program. Again, that's not a lot, especially considering what other programs in the SEC do, but you give me a coach that can make the tournament 3 out of every 5 years and be decently competitive and around 500 or above 500 in the SEC, I think this fan base will take that in a heartbeat. Yeah. You just haven't had that.
No, but it's the complete opposite right now.
Yeah, it's frustrating because you want to be talking about a team that's, like, especially when you look at the dichotomy between men's and women's basketball, right? And look, Dawn State is legitimately one of the greatest women's basketball coaches of all time. So you struck gold when you hired her, well over 15 years ago, and what she's turned this program into. And I guess in a way that makes the lack of success for men's basketball look worse, right? Because you're being compared to quite literally the standard when it comes to the women's side of basketball. And it's frustrating because, again, this is a fan base and a community that loves its basketball. And that's something that I've noticed right away when I got here, started doing this job, is how much people care and want to care about this team. And it just doesn't correlate with the amount of success that this program's had over the years.
Yeah, maybe I'm missing something, but I just have not. I don't know if I can necessarily speak to the love and passion for basketball, at least on the men's side, because 2 years ago, sure, everyone shows up when they're winning. But in the time since then, I mean, the crowds have been abysmal at games, and I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something, but I don't know. I mean, is there really that much level of interest and investment in this men's basketball program to begin with? I mean, I don't know. Maybe I
think there is.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Because even in a bad season like this, when we're talking about them in segments like this, people are texting, people are calling, people are saying they're not watching. They still care, right? They're still aware of what's happening and voicing their frustration because they want to see it be successful. And again, you don't come in here as a new hire with an insanely high bar to clear, but for whatever reason, nobody in the past handful of decades has been able to deliver consistency at all. And that's all you want is consistency, just something you can believe in every single year. Yeah, you're not going to make the tournament every single time. I think most people in this fan base can accept that. But having them hovering around the bubble is something that everybody wants. And you're not there right now.
No, you're not. So I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do, but it's going to, Jeremiah's going to have to do something eventually here, whether it is retaining LP, cutting him loose. Something's going to have to happen here over the next few weeks because the season ends in less than a month. So
yes, it does. Anyways, again, appreciate you guys weighing in on the Firehouse Subs text line at 803-404-6100. I did mention a moment ago we're going to get into some bowl projections here because we are 199 days away from South Carolina starting its season against Kent State over at Williams-Rice Stadium. A lot of offseason conversation happens between now and then. Jack, you know me. I love a good bowl projection, and our guy, Brett McMurphy, known South Carolina hater apparently, considering last year when he didn't have him ranked in the top 25. In hindsight, he was obviously very right about what this team ended up being. He does have them in a bowl game, so he at least believes that South Carolina is going to clear the 6-win mark this year and be in the Liberty Bowl taking on Houston. Now, if you look at the history of the Liberty Bowl with the SEC, that means you're probably going to be about a 6 to 7 win team. So he expects them to improve, not by a ton, but at least they'll have a winning record in his mind.
I don't know if that's good enough. That's the first thing I think of. I don't know if that's going to be enough to keep Shane Beamer here. Given what he had to say at the end of last season, and again, said this multiple times, cannot blame him at all for feeling the way that he did about feeling like, yeah, this time next year, going to be right in the middle of the playoff conversation. That is okay to say. The problem that comes with that is that now you got expectations, and now you got people thinking, okay, this team, when in reality, South Carolina probably is about a 6, 7, 8 win team. Now we got people thinking, oh, well, South Carolina, hey, Shane Beamer said it, so that means South Carolina should be right in the mix for the college football playoff with like a 9 or 10 win record on their resume for 2026. But if you fall short of that, what happens? And I just don't think barely making a bowl game is good enough, especially when you're likely going to start the season off. You're almost guaranteed to start this. You have a 99% chance probably to start the season off 2-0 with wins against Kent State and Towson. You're probably have like an 80% chance to start the off 3-0 with a home game against Mississippi State. Definitely at the bottom of the SEC heading into this season. You would start 3-0 and then you'd only win 3 more games the rest of the way. That's not acceptable. That's not acceptable because that means you're going to finish well under 500 in conference play. You're going to lose a lot of games, and that's just, I don't know. It's not good enough when you look at the context of look who they beat at the start of the year and look who look how they finished the rest of the way over the final 9 games.
Let's play devil's advocate here, okay? Let's go 7-5. So go to the better end of that 6 to 7 win spectrum. Let's say you go 7-5 in the regular season, and you, as you pointed out, you start out the season 3-0. You beat Kent State, you beat Towson, you beat Mississippi State. Okay, no real surprise there. You go on the road and you lose to Alabama. Tight game as it has been the past couple of years, but you lose in a last-second field goal or something along those lines. You beat Kentucky. Okay, now you're suddenly 4-1. You go on the road and you beat Florida. So now you're 5-1 entering the back half, or almost the back half of your schedule. So then, all right, we need 2 more wins over the course of the you need 2 more wins over the course of the remainder of the year. So let's say you beat Clemson. Hey, still beat your rival, and you beat Arkansas, but you lose the other games to Georgia, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, and Tennessee. 3 of those teams, which Brett McMurphy had in his college football playoff, which we'll get into in a moment in terms of his projections. Is that still acceptable? Like, considering the fact that most of the teams you lost to would be teams in the college football playoff, and you beat Clemson to wrap up the regular season?
Sure. I mean, I think that would be better in some sense, but it's still not enough, because look at what you have coming back. You were able to retain your top 3 players by far. You were able to retain your freak of a wide receiver, a top 10 NFL draft pick edge rusher, and a quarterback that is still viewed very highly by many people and could potentially still go as a first-round pick in next year's draft. And if that does not, like, typically teams take advantage of that typically, especially with the supporting cast South Carolina's going to have around those guys. There's no reason to think this can't be an 8-9 win team. Now, and is there a huge difference between 8 and 7 wins? Yes, I think there is a big difference, because you're going to a much better bowl game than the Liberty Bowl. You maybe just came up short in some of those games, like you mentioned, to Tennessee, Georgia, Texas A&M, like teams like that. But I don't know, man. I just don't think, for everything that happened this offseason, for all the moves you made, to only improve by a few wins and still barely kind of make a bowl game with 7 wins, I don't know. I mean, I think my ceiling's a little bit higher, in my opinion, just because of what happened this offseason. Everything went pretty much according to plan. This roster is in much better shape, and I think they got a chance to be a lot better this season, especially if the offense, this kind of all hinges on the offense, because we saw what happened with the Mike Shula offense last year. I don't think it's that far of a stretch to say that this year's offense is going to be a lot better, because they got Kendall Browse in there, you got Lenoris back, you got some weapons around him. Like, if this offense is any bit competent heading into 26, they should, on paper, have a much better year, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, and I think, mentioned a moment ago, like, let's say you lose on a last-second field goal to Alabama. Let's say these other losses are close as well. That is something that's been a consistent problem these past couple years, is losing games close. You were competitive in a lot of the games that you lost this past year as well, not being able to close it out in the fourth quarter, which is something that Beamer mentioned when talking to Wes and Chris the other day on Gamecock Central, is being able to finish out the fourth quarter, because it's not something you did a season ago. I think that excuse may be gone at that point of, like, all right, now we're 2 years into not being able to close games, or 2 back-to-back years of not being able to close games out. Even tight losses to good teams, I probably won't be as acceptable anymore, because, like, all right, at some point you have to get over the hump, especially with the talent that you have coming back for this year. But I don't know. I think it's and it also depends on what the rest of the SEC looks like, how that plays out, and again, obviously what your schedule ends up kind of bearing out in terms of the success of those teams. But I mean, jumping from 4 to 7 wins is a pretty significant swing, all things considered. And again, how much of the factor of what happens with Maneri and Paris play into this as well, because they all got buyouts, and so does Beamer, in terms of if you would make a move or not, if you only went 7-5 and ended up in the Liberty Bowl against Houston.
Yeah, I just think it has to be better. That's the thing, man. Especially when you put those expectations on, and I can't blame them, but it has to be better.
So what did McMurphy think about the college football playoff for this upcoming year? We'll dive into it next here on The Game. Welcome back in. Extra Point. Sourhead Jack Belcher with you here on your Wednesday on the game. Discussing bowl projections as we're just under 200 days away from the 2026 college football season getting rolling, and we'll have plenty more of these as the offseason goes along. These from Brett McMurphy of On 3. Again, South Carolina, according to him, projected to be in the AutoZone Liberty Bowl taking on Houston, which would mean Carolina's about 6-6 or 7-5 based on the history of that bowl game with the SEC. But what does he think about the college football playoff that is staying at 12 teams for this upcoming season? Well, maybe surprising some people, he has Notre Dame as the number 1 seed. Georgia's the number 2 seed. Ohio State is the 3, and Miami is the 4. I would assume that Georgia, Ohio State, and Miami would have been the respective conference champions of those 3 conferences, and Notre Dame to be number 1. That means you would have to go wire to wire, undefeated during the regular season, which they're not incapable of doing. Of course, they got snubbed this past year, but any shock in the top 4 that he's laying out there?
Nah, man, I look at Notre Dame's schedule. I agree. Notre Dame has no excuse, let alone not just to make the college football playoff. That should almost be a guarantee with this schedule. They should go undefeated and likely be the number 1 seed. So I agree, because look at the schedule here. They play Wisconsin, Rice, Michigan State, at Purdue, at UNC, Stanford, at BYU, Navy, Miami, Boston College, SMU, at Syracuse. The only games that I think are a little bit tricky are at BYU and home versus Miami, but I think they can win both those games. So I think it is very realistic for Notre Dame to go undefeated and be the number 1 seed. Besides that, I agree. Like Georgia, Ohio State, Miami, we'll see, because what does Miami look like after? I mean, let's be honest, it was kind of the perfect storm for them last year in getting into the playoff. They had the win over Notre Dame that really got them in, and then from there they just went on a Cinderella-type run as a 10 seed and made it all the way to the national championship. We'll see how Darian Mensah does for them this year. They got to replace some other pieces, but they got Tony coming back. I mean, this could be a fun team to watch, but I think if Notre Dame's the number 1 seed, that means they're going to have to, they would have beaten Miami, and I wonder if Miami drops another game along the way. But I agree with the top 3 for sure.
Elsewhere, and of course those top 4 seeds would end up getting the first round buys as they have the past couple seasons. Elsewhere, he has number 5 Texas, number 6 Texas Tech, number 7 Indiana, and number 8 Oregon. Those would be the 4 teams that will be hosting the first round matchups on the respective campus sites. So believer that Kurt Cignetti is going to get his team back to the playoff. Not a believer, it seems like, that he's going to win back-to-back Big Ten titles and likely not be undefeated for the second year in a row.
Yeah, I don't see Indiana going undefeated. The thing about his roster was that it was so good last year. It was a lot of JMU guys, a lot of transfers, and that can work, right? We saw that last year where if you hit on your portal guys, it works. But if you have a year where you don't hit on all those guys, especially let's say Josh Hoover's just not going to be let's say he's not as good as Mendoza. We don't know that for sure. Let's say he's not as good. That might result in a loss or 2 for Indiana. But I still think they are going to be good enough to make the college football playoff, and I agree. They probably will end up somewhere, probably not getting a bye, but probably hosting as a first round.
Oregon is a number 8 seed. To me, that's disappointing, right? Oregon is a team that are returning Dante Moore. They obviously have a wealth of talent around him. This seems like, and I know that they were the number 1 seed as the Big Ten champion now 2 seasons ago, but this seems like the year that Oregon should be back in that mix for playing for, if not winning, the Big Ten title again, just given what they have coming back, namely with Dante Moore.
They should. I mean, I think the schedule, it's a little tricky. You get at Ohio State, and this is in back-to-back weeks, by the way, at Ohio State, then home versus Michigan. That could be tricky. You get Washington end of the year. You're at Illinois. I mean, going on the the East Coast can be a little bit tougher, or Midwest, I should say. And then you have at Southern Cal. I mean, that's not necessarily the easiest Big Ten slate. And you get Boise State at the beginning of the year, so who knows how Boise State could be challenge-wise. So I think Oregon's definitely going. They have to be in the playoff this year, right? I mean, with Dante Moore coming back, Dan Lanning, we think, is one of the next coaches to win a national championship of the guys that haven't done so yet. This feels like the year that Oregon's really got to go big or go home.
Given that Oregon's kind of the poster child for what resources can do for you in NIL. Look, Oregon was a good program before NIL came along, but they quite literally have one of the best payrolls in all of college football, thanks in large part to Phil Knight and the Nike money. Are they one of those programs where missing the playoff is completely unacceptable? Is there any excuse why Oregon, outside of just mass injuries across the entire team, should ever miss the college football playoff in this era?
That's a little bit tough. For this year, though, I would say it's completely unacceptable to miss the college football playoff. There is no reason why Oregon should not be hosting a playoff game once again for another year. There's just no reason for it.
Yeah.
It would be a massive step back for Oregon to go from, weren't they the top overall seed?
Yeah, in the first 12
the first year. Then they get crushed in the Rose Bowl. Then they get crushed by Indiana last year in the Peach Bowl. One win away from getting to the national championship. Like for them to go from that to missing the playoff, that would be extremely disappointing, especially with the hype surrounding Dante Moore coming back.
And of course, Texas, the number 5 seed, again, near number 2 for Arch Manning as a starter, coming back. Again, talk about resources and having weapons around him. He's going to have plenty of those. And it was disappointing for them to not make the playoff this past year, given what they have available to them. And this basically says to me that they should be playing like Georgia in the SEC championship game once again, in terms of being the number 5 overall seed.
I could see it. And honestly, as much as we talk about Oregon, this is kind of like a huge year for them. This is a massive year for Texas. After missing the playoff, Arch is back for another year. Like, can we start having the discussion about big game Sark? Because at some point, he's got to start winning these big games. Like, you give him a pass first few years where Texas is kind of just getting back to being good again, and then they lose in the Sugar Bowl to Washington, then they lose in the Cotton Bowl to Ohio State. Give them a pass. Like, those teams were really good, but just not as good as those other teams. But Texas, I mean, they have no reason, no excuse to not be in the playoff this year.
His other 4 teams, of course, these would be the teams going on the road in the first round. He had the number 9 seed for Utah, the number 10 seed for Texas A&M, number 11 seed for Oklahoma, and then the number 12 seed, Jeff Traylor and UTSA, representing the group of 5. That's kind of been a popular pick for G5 the past couple of years, even though UTSA, since joining the American Conference, has just kind of been average to like okay. The expectation from Murphy, at least, is they get themselves back in that mix of being an AAC title contender and then making the playoff, obviously.
The big thing with UTSA, I don't know exactly what their roster's looking like head to toe, but I will say they're a team that puts up a lot of points. But there were some games last year where they gave up 55 points to South Florida. They gave up 55 points to North Texas. Gave up 43 points to Texas State. I mean, they got to be a little bit better defensively, but this is a really good scoring offense. So can that kind of continue heading into 26? Again, it's probably going to be a new roster with the way college athletics go. But if they can kind of get back to that same level of scoring offensively and have a better defense, yeah, I could see this being this could be a fun little pick here.
We'll see how right McMurphy is, and again, there'll be plenty more projections that come out over the course of the offseason. We'll dive into those as they do become available. Coming up next, though, we'll get back into the Jerome Tang situation. What is the line for being able to criticize players in today's world of college sports? We'll hit that coming up next. It is The Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you here on your Wednesday on The Game.
If you've been frustrated in the past by some of the companies you've had out to your home or business when you have HVAC problems, let me give you a recommendation for a better service. That's our folks over at Krantz Cooling and Heating, Krantz, cooling with a K, KrantzCooling.com. They've been around since 1983. They're a local family-owned business, and I can personally attest to how awesome they are. They've been to my home. They've been to Wes's home. They've installed new units. They've taken care of problems for us. They've let us know exactly what is going on and help us solve the problems as they come along. You can join the Krantz Club to make sure you're on top of your maintenance. They do installations, repairs, and maintenance on all of your HVAC units. Again, they do residential and commercial, so whether you're a homeowner or a business owner or both, they can help you out. 803-672-3224. Go online to krantzcooling.com. You can text them. You can get a visit scheduled. You can even pay your bill online or sign up. Krantz Cooling.
All right, welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Felcher with you here on your Wednesday on the game. It is time for Who Sprung a Leak, brought to you by our friends over at American Leak Detection. It's not a team this time, but negotiations between Major League Baseball and Major League Baseball Players Association have sprung quite a leak because yesterday, Jack, the executive director of the MLBPA, Tony Clark, forced to resign after an internal investigation revealed he had an inappropriate relationship with his sister-in-law, who the MLBPA had hired a couple years ago, and now the spokesperson for the players is now out in a very critical time amidst those negotiations with the league.
This is a huge news that broke yesterday, and he's been the executive director of the MLBPA since 2013. So he's been there for a while now. And he's been at the heart of these negotiations with different things that have happened over the years. And this comes at a critical point because a lot of folks, including myself, do believe that the 2027 season will start with a strike. And that's because there's this whole discussion about, okay, is there going to be a salary cap, a salary floor? And I don't think the players are going to want that to happen because they want to get paid as much as possible. But the owners, this is a problem. If the owners are seeing this, it's a huge win for them because the MLBPA director steps down and he's forced to resign. And now they got to find somebody to represent the players now, and that's a little easier said than done. But the way this went down, I don't know. That's that. I was not expecting to see that. I would have thought he would have just resigned for some reason, but definitely not this.
Yeah. What's that like next family get together going to be like?
Yeah. How
does that go?
Like, yeah, this is like his brother. Like that's that's awful.
That's the one thing we don't know is like nothing's been mentioned about his brother and the reports coming out about this. So how does he factor in? Is he associated with this at all? Like this is fascinating to me, right?
I mean, it's his sister-in-law, so it's got to be his brother. That's
I mean, I know it's his brother, but
that's insane.
Like, what's his story? How did this come about? Like, now I'm fascinated, right? Him resigning the other day was interesting enough, and now we obviously know why. But there's more details to come out about this, I'm sure.
Yeah, but it really does come at a bad time, just because we're about a full year out from the 27 season, and I mean, like, this is probably going to be the last season with normal baseball, because next year it just feels like almost a guarantee that we're going to get a strike, and who knows how long that's going to go, because the last time there was a strike was, I believe it was the 21 season.
Yep, it was delayed start.
Yes, and it was delayed by about a week. So, I mean, it could take a while. We've seen strike 94. Mm-hmm. There was the strike that ended the season.
Delayed the start of 95.
Yep. Yeah, 81 there was a strike that really pushed things back. So we'll see, but this is definitely, it's not ideal for the players, I'll tell you that. It definitely gives the owners a bit of a leg up right now in terms of negotiations when they do happen.
Well, speaking of less than ideal, Jerome Tang's comments last week as K-State got dominated by Cincinnati were seen as less than ideal by the university as they fired him, quote unquote, with cause for saying this last week.
This was embarrassing. These dudes do not deserve to wear this uniform. There will be very few of them in it next year. I'm embarrassed for the university. I'm embarrassed for our fans, our student section. It is just ridiculous. We got practice at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, and we will get this thing right. I have no answer, no words. So y'all got two questions. So whoever want to ask two questions, I'll answer them to the best of my ability right now. But right now, I'm pissed.
So we talked about this yesterday. Again, they deemed that as for cause for firing because he embarrassed the players, embarrassed the university, threw people onto the bus, and all that kind of stuff. He's lawyered up. They're going to take this to court, and I fully expect Jerome Tang to win. This is an interesting case, though, because I think a lot of other universities are looking at this. If K-State were to win this court case, I think a lot of other schools would be like, oh, hey, wait a minute. We might have a loophole if our coach starts to go a little bit sideways and we don't like the results. If we can pick out a cherry pick something from one of his press conferences, maybe we could fire him with cause too.
I just don't see this going Kansas State's way. I get it. Look, I salute them for trying, because it is a almost, if it does work, it is a one-way ticket out of not having to pay him almost $19 million in buyout money. That's a lot of money that you can use for other things with your basketball program and other athletics at Kansas State. I just don't see a way in which that holds up. And look, these players need to also probably be held accountable, because they're almost, they're essentially, let's call it for what it is. They're essentially professional athletes because they're getting paid now.
Yep.
And they're getting paid lots of money to perform. And when you don't perform, you are subject to criticism. Now, is it cool to be criticizing these guys and throwing them under the bus in a press conference setting? Not really. I mean, maybe some people will feel like it's fine, but I don't know. That's not probably the best way to handle things. It's definitely not a way to keep your team together, because even if he was still the coach right now, I mean, if I'm a player, I don't know even if I'm getting paid, I don't know if I would want to play for that guy right now after just throwing me under the bus, telling me I'm not going to be there next year. So I'm sure that probably rubs a lot of guys the wrong way. But also, it's like, he said those things, and Kansas State felt the need to fire him. But I just don't see this. I'd be shocked if this holds up in court.
Well, where's the line? Like, I think that's what we're kind of trying to determine here is where's the line of what you can say about now these athletes that are getting paid a lot of money, especially at a place like Kansas State, to play a sport. I mean, I don't think you can go down the path of calling them like just disgraceful human beings or stupid idiots or things like that. But like, hey, you don't deserve to wear the uniform by the way that you play. I don't think that that's completely outlandish, right?
No,
and
it's not that crazy.
if Jerome Tang would have stuck around for another year, probably would have had an overhauled roster, given how poor this team was. Like, I don't think that's like crossing a line. Now, yeah, if you start making personal attacks or things like that, sure, that's crossing over too much. But these guys shouldn't be immune from criticism. And there was always that funny debate years ago of like, well, they're student athletes, they're only getting scholarship, be careful, right? But now it's like, no, dude, you're going to Kansas State. You're making a lot of money to play basketball because they have NIL resources for that kind of stuff. You should be subject to some degree of criticism. Nothing extreme, obviously, but I didn't hear anything about what Jerome Tang said there and be like, oh, that's way out of line. No way he should be able to say that.
They are. I don't think they're student athletes at this point. They are athlete students because the athletes certainly come first because why are you getting paid to come to Kansas State? It's certainly, in most cases, not on scholarship for your academics. It is certainly for your athletic abilities and what you are able to provide from an entertainment value. The student part of it, most of these guys are taking online classes anyway. So I'm sure some of them have hardly ever stepped foot on campus at these universities. But in the case of Kansas State, yeah, look, they got to perform better. I mean, it's kind of like South Carolina in a lot of ways, where a few years ago Kansas State makes it to the Elite Eight, and now they're at a point where they've only got one conference win. I mean, changes had to be made for Jerome Tang to get fired. I think it's just this gave Kansas State, even if it's a slight opening to make a move, they were going to take advantage of it, and if it means they don't have to pay the buyout, they really luck out. But I just don't know if that's. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what it would take for it to hold up. I just don't see it being the case.
Well, for the time being, while this is still potentially pending a court situation, if I'm a head coach that's not performing well right now, I'd be very careful about what I say in press conferences because your school may try and go down the same route in terms of, oh, he was mean to the players. We don't have to pay him a buyout now. Like, again, I don't think it's going to hold up, but until you know for sure, I'd be careful. Yeah,
I mean, we'll see. But you're right, though, Tyler. Like, if this does hold up in court and Kansas State wins this, I mean, it's going to really be. I mean, if you're a coach, you really got to be careful about what you say, and even the slightest thing. I mean, if there's a large buyout and you're not performing well, and here's the thing. I think I heard you and Bill talking about this yesterday. If Kansas State's winning, this is nothing.
Oh, of course. Yeah, they're the top of the Big 12.
It's nothing.
This isn't a thing.
Yeah, it's not even a big deal. It may be a little bit of a talking point, but it's not going to get him fired, obviously. But because Kansas State's probably looking for a way out, this is the one chance they have. They're going to take every bit of it and make sure they don't have to pay him a cent.
We will see what happens. Again, that is headed to court more likely than not. And Jerome Tang already lured up and ready to go. We'll come back, wrap up the hour. Jen Jensen from the early game going to join me to talk some racing as the first weekend of NASCAR is officially in the books as we wrap up the Extra Point here on your Wednesday on the Game.
Zane Smith with him. On the bottom is Tyler Reddick. They come up single file. Zane Smith's going to have one shot at Chase Elliott, NASCAR champion, most popular driver, trying for the win, and Reddick to the top side. He's got help. Riley Herbst, his teammate. Reddick drops to the bottom. Alongside Elliott, in the wall goes Herbst, and Tyler Reddick comes to the line. Wow. A shower of sparks behind him.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Points. I'll head along with you here, wrapping up the hour here on your Wednesday on the Game. That was the call on Sunday afternoon via Fox Sports. Mike Joy there with the Fox Sports booth. As, yes, indeed, Tyler Reddick picks up the win in the 2026 Daytona 500. Jen Jensen joining me now on the AAA Heating and Air phone lines, as she does each and every week. Talk some racing. And, Jen, I've been a fan a long time. That might be the most chaotic final lap of the 500 I've seen maybe ever.
Yes. You expect chaos and melee. You expect somebody who hasn't really led any laps in the race to win. That delivered 100%. That was amazing. What a finish.
Yeah, it went from Hocevar leading at the white flag, McDowell behind him, who did a phenomenal job saving fuel, by the way. Didn't have to pit in that last stage. They wrecked going into turn number one. Dices the field up. It looks like Chase Elliott is on his way to winning his first Daytona 500, something that's eluded the 2020 champion up to this point. You got Zane Smith on his bumper, and then here comes Reddick slicing through. Herbst goes to the outside. Is Keselowski going to be able to make a run? So much happened in that final lap, and we unfortunately tore up a lot of cars in the process.
Man, didn't we, though? And it was fun to see, for Zane Smith to have won stage one and to be, potentially contending for the win. That was a pretty exciting thing, in my opinion. And then I thought, well, maybe Stenhouse was going to pull it out, because it seems like Stenhouse doesn't win unless he's at a super speedway.
Right.
But that didn't happen, and you really didn't know who was going to win until the very end. Yeah,
and again, Reddick only leads the one lap that day. Most important one, obviously, to pick up the victory. And huge for him, obviously, last year was a bit of a struggle. Ran consistently, but did not find his way to victory lane. Bubba Wallace, the only one to win for 23-11 a season ago. So great way to get the season started off for him. And obviously, as the greater sports world is talking about, Michael Jordan is now a champion owner for the Daytona 500 to add to his already laundry list of accomplishments in basketball.
More rings for the champ. I bet he never expected that he would get anything that had anything to do with racing. But had you seen the interesting stat about 2311, where a crown jewel race has been won by a 2311 driver when a fictional character has been a dignitary? Brickyard 400, you had the Cookie Monster as a grand marshal, and Bubba won that one. And then
That's
the Daytona 500, Bart Simpson was the honorary starter. So it's like, well, is there an interesting coincidence here for Michael Jordan's teams?
So should we get SpongeBob for the Coke 600? Is that what you're telling me?
I'm thinking that maybe, I don't know, there could be a trend here. Mm-hmm.
There's certainly some kind of correlation there. Again, Jen Jensen joining me here on the AAA Heat and Air phone lines, talking about the Daytona 500 from Sunday. And, Reddick is somebody, and look, we're going to talk about the championship as the season rolls along. He's somebody that is always going to be in that mix towards the top 8 to 10 drivers in the sport. Again, last year didn't win any races, but still very competitive. And this gets his season started off on the right foot. Now, again, with the change to the chase, this does not guarantee you anything, but you obviously start the season off as the points leader, something to build off of, and we know he obviously has speed quite literally everywhere, so I expect him to win a lot more races this year.
Oh, I think so. And starting off your season with 58 points, that's a nice way to get the ball rolling. And, he is going to be a contender. I think hopefully this year is going to be a little – he had a lot personally going on last year, so I'm hoping that overall it will be a good season for him. But it's never a dull moment when it comes to Daytona, so it'll be interesting to see how Atlanta plays out as far as who continues to accumulate points.
As far as the race itself, there's the ongoing debate in reference to the fuel saving and all that kind of stuff that the field kind of does, where they run 3 wide, basically running about 60% throttle, trying to save fuel and all that. It does not bother me as much as it does other people, I think, and I look no further than the Indy 500, which is an entire race that revolves around fuel saving. I think that's something that teams have figured out, and then that some of the best drivers do better than others. Again, is it the most entertaining form of racing at times? Not necessarily, but I don't think it's something that is easily fixable, and I think it's going to be here to stay for a while.
Yeah, I think so, and I agree that. Is it that exciting? No, but I didn't really feel like there was quite as much limping around this year. I don't know. Maybe things just seemed like they were mixed up a little bit better, and field strategies were a little bit different. Obviously, you're trying to get manufacturers to work together to come in and be more dominant. But overall, I think it's just kind of a necessary evil of that type of racing. And as long as we get good racing a majority of the time, yeah, I'll take it with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it didn't prevent the race from being the same drama-filled ending that it usually is. And again, kind of lost in the shuffle there is you don't have that late caution. McDowell maybe ends up winning this race by a pretty wide margin purely on fuel mileage. So things got stacked up, and obviously we had the results we had there on the last lap. But overall, I'm glad we're finally back racing again. I mentioned this the other week when it came to the Clash. We had an off season full of tragedy and drama and lawsuits and all those kind of things. So it is good that we're finally back on the track talking about the results and looking forward to what's next, and obviously pursuing who's going to be the champion for the season now.
Yep, and what a great way to start everything as far as with the 500 with Kyle Busch. You know, he's tried to win the race like 21 times. He at least gets the pole. So I'm thinking, well, you know, different crew chief this year. Maybe there's things they're going to be looking up for him. You look at some rookies in there. You know, you got Zilich. See what he can do to mix things up. Host of ours should be honing his craft a little bit better. The SVG, I didn't think he did terrible on the race overall for the weekend. So yeah, I'm looking forward to a really good season.
Yeah, should be a lot of fun. And again, we're changing from the playoffs to the chase now. And that's one thing I did want to note. It felt really good watching the race on Sunday. And there were a few mentions, hey, the chase is back and all this kind of stuff. But it didn't feel like a dominant headline watching the race. And when Reddick gets out and he's celebrating, nobody's saying, hey, guess what? You're in the playoffs. Like, I like the fact that for the first time in over a decade, the 500 truly felt like it was standing on its own again, which is very important.
You know, it really is. And I'm with you. And after the first race, okay, you look at the points, and you've got Reddick, Logano, Elliott, Zane Smith, and Stenhouse. Is Stenhouse going to stay there? No. Am I glad that if he had won, it wouldn't be a guarantee that he would be in the playoffs or in the chase? Absolutely. So I agree. I love the points. I love the chase being back. And I think it's just going to make a really good season.
Should be fun. And the fun keeps on going because they head to my home track next to Atlanta, which over the past couple of years has proven to be kind of the best super speedway racing, maybe the best overall racing we see each and every year.
I agree. I love that track. I've not been, so you're going to have to take me there and break me in sometime soon.
I definitely will. It is definitely worth it. A lot of fun. I won't be there this upcoming weekend, but we'll try and get back there coming up later on this summer. Jen, I appreciate it as always, and we'll talk to you next week.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Tyler.
Jen Jensen there from the early game. We'll talk about what happens in Atlanta coming up next Wednesday. We'll dive back in to Gamecock baseball coming up next as we start the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game. 11 o'clock on your Wednesday morning. Welcome in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. It's our Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell back in the fold after the long weekend. Good time, get away, do some fun stuff. Saw the picture from the airport.
Yeah, went and saw some family.
Yeah.
So
good.
It was good. Yeah.
Did you completely disconnect from everything?
No.
No?
Not at all.
That's not a thing, really.
Not a thing.
Do you have to at least be discreet about it so it doesn't look like you're working when you're out doing other things?
I can't admit that on air. But
Okay, fair
Yeah.
enough.
No comment.
No comment.
Fair enough. We'll get your thoughts on things that happened over the weekend. We'll kind of loop it into what happened last night with Gamecock baseball because you missed our discussion yesterday. But there was a concern coming away from the opening series against Northern Kentucky. You win the series. Obviously, that's goal number one. Saturday did not go the way you wanted it to. Maneri obviously spoke about the players not having the energy, being fatigued after playing the doubleheader on Friday. And I think that offered quite a level of concern going to last night's game. Like, all right, you got 5 games over the course of the next 6 days. Where's the energy going to be at? Carolina does pick up a pretty convincing victory, 8-2 last night over Wofford up there in Spartanburg. I don't think it alleviates concerns, but it's better than the alternative of obviously losing last night's game. So still concerns, obviously, but you went out there and did your job last night as a baseball team.
Yeah, and you know what, man? Here's the thing. If you look around college baseball, like they're quote unquote, bigger schools, bigger teams losing a game to lesser opponents or even sometimes losing series. And, their fans get ticked off and you kind of have to remind them like, hey, like that's baseball. It's going to happen. You don't love it. You'd love to win all those. In South Carolina, weirdly enough, as we talked about on Friday, actually was incredibly good in the midweek last year and basically won all of their games against sort of, what you would say were non-power fours. And so I think it's one of those things where would you be quite as concerned if not for what happened last year? Like, I think if this team was, like, really good last year and then, they won a big doubleheader, had the walk-off, you would actually hope you could have carried momentum into Saturday. But you kind of had the opposite. It was almost like there was a hangover from Friday into Saturday. And so, yeah, I think there is concern there because of what Gamecock fans all witnessed last year. Now, this team, there's a ton of season to be played. Really, we're not going to know much of anything, in my opinion, until we start to really get into Clemson and SEC play. But you do start to see little trends that you kind of say, all right, you need to find a way to quickly turn that around. One of them being hitting with runners in scoring position. That's something that you're going to, especially for a team where, this was built via the portal, where you're looking at kind of those back of the baseball card stats and saying, hey, this guy hit, that guy hit, this other guy was a hitter at this other level of baseball. You need for that to translate over, obviously, to here. And you haven't faced like great pitching yet is the thing. So you would think it would have translated. But, man, baseball, it's a funny thing, man. A 4-game sample size is essentially like a quarter of football. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
like not a quarter of your schedule. Literally, like a few. You've had a few drives at this point. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's nothing in the grand scheme. So I would say, all right, you can acknowledge there are some concerns, but these aren't concerns yet that have to be there. Like maybe some of them get fixed.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about yesterday, man. If this was year one for Paul Maneri, or if last year had not happened like it had, you would probably, most people, would just chalk it up to the whole that's baseball thing. It's early. We'll see. You still won the series. You got to clean these things up. But the issue is that the problems that we saw last year, which were, think back last year to a lot of the conversation. It was runners in scoring position, not hitting enough. That is what you saw in that first series. Like, even in the wins, you come out of that thing, what was the stat? 4 for 30.
Yep.
Runners in scoring position. And so people it's a very natural human and fan reaction to say, here we go again type of thing, right? But, flip that coin on the other side. Last year, think back, Carolina started, I think, 9-0, did not face significant competition. And you're going, okay, 9-0, cool, sounds good. There's some things that have been good, some things that have not been so good. The litmus test is going to be the Clemson series. Well, Clemson series hits. The games are actually pretty close. Like, one of them was closer than the score was, but you lost all 3 games. You got swept. Then SEC play hits. You split the first 2 against Oklahoma, got a chance to win number 3. You go to extras, you lose. And from there, kind of the wheels fall off, right? So I think, it's very natural to look at it through the lens of last season, even though it's a different team because it's pretty much the same staff, et cetera. And so you're saying, okay, here we go again. But does that mean that's actually going to be the case? No. If South Carolina had dominated Northern Kentucky, swept the series, won every game, 10-0, would that mean you're going to go beat Clemson and run through it? No, it wouldn't mean that either. So fair to be concerned based on some of the, again, very small sample size trends from week 1? Yeah, fair. Does that mean all those issues are going to persist the entire year? No, not necessarily. And it will be. I do think the Clemson game will be a really nice litmus test.
Last night, a lot better at the plate. You mentioned that 4 for 30 stat against Northern Kentucky with runners in scoring position. 5 of 11 last night in that same regard. So you outdid the entire weekend in 9 innings of work last night. Again, the competition level still not comparable to where you're going to see in the SEC, but handled your business from last night in the early. Yes, Wes.
I was going to say, too, another part of baseball is kind of just this weird dynamic, and I think we saw it early on last night where you may not be facing quote-unquote great pitching, but kind of, I don't want to say bad pitching, but at times when you're facing a lesser talented arm, it sometimes just messes up your timing completely. I mean, the kid who started for Wofford just was throwing this sidewinder, just like slop, basically. And
slop.
I mean, that's what it was.
That's a great word.
He's throwing a changeup it looks like it's going 70 miles an hour up there. And so, there are many different reasons that 96, like at the eyes, is hard to hit, but then you at least get used to seeing hard-throwing righties in the SEC. When you step down and the ball just looks like it's moving like slow-pitch softball or something, it can take a little bit of time to kind of, I would say, not catch up, but like to get your timing down. And so I think that's always a factor in your midweeks. And South Carolina took a second to get going, and then they were able to obviously put the game away. Scobie got a great swing off on, that bomb he hit later in the game. And, that on the road too, neutral site-ish, I guess. Like that's actually a decent win last night, I thought, for South Carolina, all things considered. You're getting some different pitchers out there. You didn't really have to sweat it out at the end. I'll take that win on a Tuesday night every week, I guess I should say.
Yeah, and through the first 4 games so far, I think one of the better stories of this team has been the pitching so far. You liked what you got pretty much out of your 3 starters from over the weekend. Shikoli last night getting his first start. Obviously ran into trouble immediately where he gives up that home run on the second pitch. A couple of Scobie's throws don't get to first base in time, so you put a couple runners on, but he was able to settle in, really kind of limit the damage after that. That was the only run that he allowed, and the bullpen came in and obviously did their work as well. So it seems like, and again, this is something we talk about seemingly every baseball season. Sometimes one area is ahead of the other. Pitching may be ahead of hitting may be ahead of pitching. It looks like right now pitching is the true strength of this team. Again, it's only 4 games, so we've still got a lot more baseball left to be played, but you feel good about what you have on the mound as of right now. Another opportunity tonight against Gardner-Webb before you welcome in the Service Academies this weekend, and obviously we'll keep a very close eye on how the hitting performs going forward as you get closer to that Clemson series coming up next weekend.
Yeah, and I mean, guys, I think we had, I think it was last year, not the year before, I think we were having a similar conversation early last season. yeah, you open with Sacred Heart. You remember you gave up, 3 in the first game. Then you pitched 2 shutouts. And, you really were not giving up much of anything. And we were going, man, the pitchers may actually be ahead of what expectations were. And then, you get into facing some real opponents. And let's be honest, like this, at least statistically, ended up being, I think, the highest ERA maybe in school history. So I think it's one of those things. I'm not putting a ton of just panic for anything on the offensive side, but I'm also not putting a ton of, hey, this group has arrived or this group is going to be great on kind of the other side of it either. I think this right now, based on last year, there's, to me, a healthy dose of skepticism, but a healthy dose of, hey, it's an entirely new team for the most part, so let's just wait and see what happens. I do, other than Saturday, which was, it is kind of disappointing to hear the coach say, like, I didn't like the energy from the group, because for a brand new team and guys that maybe obviously haven't played together before this season, I actually kind of liked the vibes from the team on Friday in terms of pulling for each other and the reactions to big plays and stuff like that. So a little disappointing for that on Saturday, but like I said, a good win yesterday, and you'll look to keep it going tonight as well.
Again, taking on Gardner-Webb coming up later on today. First pitch is at 4 o'clock. Pregame coverage starting at 3:45 right here on 107.5 The Game. If you want to go see that game, I have 2 pairs of tickets right now for callers number 4 and 5 at 803-404-6100. Again, 2 pairs of tickets to go see the Gamecocks take on Gardner-Webb later on this afternoon over at Founders Park. We'll dive back into football coming up next, and the search for a new special teams coordinator. What are they inheriting? What's the special teams unit going to look like this upcoming season for whoever that new coach is? We'll discuss that coming up next here on your Wednesday on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West Chris along with you here on your Wednesday on the game. Something we got into yesterday, of course, was the news that South Carolina is in the market for a new special teams coordinator after Joe DeCamillis departs to head back to the NFL to take over that position for the Las Vegas Raiders. So for the third time in the Beamer era, there will be a different special teams coordinator. Again, Beamer could have taken over that position himself, given his history by doing that, but he is seeking out to go out there and hire someone. We still don't have any names, I believe, as of right now in terms of anybody specific they're looking at. But, Chris, as you pointed out yesterday, it looks like a position that they're expecting to fill here pretty soon.
Yeah, it is. And, guys, so interestingly enough, like in one of those kind of just strange twists of fate, Rich Bisaccia, who has been mentioned for basically every South Carolina head coach opening, I feel like, because he was a coach here.
Or position coach.
Yeah, back in the 80s and 90s, and just has some connections here. Stepped down from his job at Green Bay last night or yesterday, and has had connections to the Palmetto State. And so a lot of people have been kind of linking that with South Carolina. From what I have heard on that, and this obviously could change, but from what I've heard is that, yes, Bisaccia is actually going to take a college job, and he has had a non-South Carolina, non-University of South Carolina job lined up for, I think, over a month. So that's something that has been maybe in the works. Now, does South Carolina get involved there at all? I don't know. We're sort of still firmly in the speculation side of things. Another name, frankly, that I checked on was Stanton Weber, who was sort of Pete Limbo's right-hand man. He left to be the actual special teams coordinator after being like an analyst here at Toledo, and then most recently got hired at Kansas State as their special teams coordinator. So, that's something. Those are some names we have checked on. Doesn't necessarily mean those names are like, on the list, so to speak. So, from what we've heard, interest from sitting special teams coordinators, in the SEC, in the ACC, in the Big 12, some NFL interest. And as we know, this is a hire that Shane Beamer is going to take very seriously and not going to, maybe this is the case for any position. But I think, let's be honest, some spots you may say, hey, let's use this position opening on molding a young coach or bringing in someone who we really, really like as a player or something like that, and he's stepping into coaching and we're going to help him grow. That's not what we've seen Shane Beamer fill the special teams coordinator role with. This one is near and dear to his heart, and both of his hires at that spot have been heavy resume guys with both Pete Limbo and Joe D.
Well, and as we talked about yesterday, he often likes to add the assistant head coach tag to his special teams coordinator as well. Limbo had already been a head coach in multiple stops before coming here. Of course, Joe D had a brief experience as a head coach in the NFL. If Rich Bisaccia was going to come to South Carolina, that would make perfect sense given the fact that he was the Raiders coach for the majority of the season a couple years ago as well. So I would expect it to be somebody that is very much a veteran, and maybe has some head coaching experience too to kind of fill that same role that Joe DeCamillis is now leaving behind. And as we kind of look at the special teams room as a whole, you're getting back your primary punt returner and kick returner with Kari Swain and Nick Harbor. Mason Love, who, as we talked about yesterday, had a very solid season punting the football, kind of gets lost in the shuffle of what was a bad year. You are breaking in your fourth different kicker in 4 years with William Joyce moving on, and then you're bringing in another new long snapper. I'm assuming it's going to be Emmett Rhodes transferring in from West Carolina. So there's some old, there's some new. So it's kind of a half and half mix of terms of returning production, not to mention all the guys that are going to be on your kickoff team, your punt team, and stuff like that are going to be probably different than a year ago that this new special teams coordinator, whoever they are, is going to be tasked with dealing with.
Yeah, I think, on one hand, you look at it and say, okay, South Carolina broke in basically all new guys at those key roles, the return spots, kicker, snapper, punter, like everything was new last year. And I think, Wes, we sat down with Shane Beamer recently, and one of the things he pointed out was we felt like we were good there. Because I've seen this a little bit. I mentioned this yesterday. There's this perception floating around out there that South Carolina wasn't that good on special teams, or they were poor, I should say, on special teams last year. And look, there were a lot of poor things on the roster. Special teams was not as much one of those things. But Shane Beamer told us, quite honestly, he felt like they were a lot better. They were where they needed to be in the first half of the season, and he was not as satisfied with that second half of the season. Felt like they needed to get better, regardless of who the special teams coach is, right? Like, he didn't want Joe D to move on. I don't think Joe D was particularly looking for a way out. He just got a chance to go back to the NFL, where he has tons of connections, obviously. So I think there were some things that he, given the emphasis and importance that he places on it, Beamer, there are some areas he wanted to get better in. So part of that is, how are you practicing, schematics, all those things. But also from a personnel standpoint, you're in a different spot than going into last year. You feel pretty good about your return guys, feel really good about your punter. You do have to solve place kicking, being field goals, and you got to figure out the kickoff guy, and then you've got to figure out, what are you going to do at snappers. So you've got a couple guys that you mentioned that they're bringing in from the portal that can, at a minimum, compete there. Upton Beliffant coming in. He'll compete with Max Kelly for both those kicking roles. Emmett Rhodes will be thrown into the mix at snapper. I think they feel like they've got some pretty good competition going into the spring there.
I think special teams, though, guys, is one of those things where people, coaches look at special teams like, hey, did we consistently cover kickoffs and punts? Did we consistently down the ball inside the 20 or inside the 10 when we were trying to? Did we execute all those things? And fans really look at special teams like, all right, did you make your field goals? And, oh, man, I remember that fake we tried and we didn't get it. You know what I'm saying? So, and those are part of it. Don't get me wrong. Like, those are parts of it you always want to try to improve. South Carolina, whether you put a ton of stock in this or not, but in ESPN's FPI, they have efficiencies that are broken down by offense, defense, and special teams. South Carolina fans may be a little bit surprised to hear that South Carolina's special teams were 7th in the country just in overall efficiency, according to ESPN metrics. And honestly, boys, you'll really kind of get ticked off if you look at the fact that South Carolina's defensive efficiency was 28th in the country. So if you're talking about 2 of the 3 thirds of the game, basically. You're 28th and you're 7th in the country. And unfortunately, you go to the offensive side and you see a big 88.
Yeah.
And I don't mean Michael Irvin. Just
there was not a Michael Irvin. And you can dive into some of those other ones, individual statistics offensively, and you might see 3 digits, which is not good, with your national ranking. So and that's another thing, we were talking about, Wes. It does make it frustrating that you created some big plays on defense. Once again, they were one of the best in the country at takeaways. They kept the team in the game. They gave you a chance. But offensively, you just could not scratch enough across. And a lot of that reared its ugly head in the fourth quarter. If you go back and look, Carolina did not score in 8 of 12 games in the fourth quarter last year. Didn't score at all. And then one of the games, Virginia Tech, you scored 14 in the fourth quarter, which you needed to win that game, but one of them was a punt return for a touchdown by Vakari Swain. So, that is not going to win you a lot of games. Two of those 4 games where you didn't score in the fourth quarter were Coastal and Kentucky. You won those. The thing about it is a lot of those games, it's not just you got blown out and didn't score in the fourth quarter. Like, you were in the games. You were leading against Missouri. You were leading against Alabama. You were in the game against Clemson, LSU, A&M. You led in the fourth quarter, right? And so, not that there's not things that defensively and special teams wise you have to improve. And I'm getting us a little off topic just talking about the offense now, but that is the biggest, has to be the biggest point of emphasis. And that's why, of course, we've seen so many changes on that side of the ball this offseason.
Yeah, and again, we'll see how they ultimately end up hiring when it comes to the special teams coordinator. You guys have mentioned you've had these ongoing conversations with Coach Beamer. We'll dive into some of those kind of starting tomorrow. And, of course, you can read all that on GamecockCentral.com. But coming up next, South Carolina's biggest hater, where does he project them for bowl games this year? We'll discuss that on the other side. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on The Game. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West Chris along with you here on your Wednesday on the game. Are you guys aware of how many days until South Carolina kicks off the 2026 season by chance? Anybody want to take a guess?
I'm sorry, Tyler. We were talking about business matters.
Okay. I'll restate the question. Are you aware of how many days until the season kicks off?
I had no clue. Wes nailed it last time.
199.
Exactly 199.
Let's go.
So that means that
Do you have like a countdown clock at your house you look at?
I just check like every couple days.
Okay.
So that means 100 days till we restart our countdown trivia challenge.
I was thinking
again.
about saying 200. So
Yeah,
200
200 would have been yesterday.
Yeah.
So I just didn't get a chance to bring it up. So again, a lot of off season left to go, obviously, until we start the season. But we're obviously going to look at list and projections and those kind of things throughout the next couple months about where people think this South Carolina team is going to be. Yeah, people like McElroy talking about them being a playoff sleeper. That's been a common thing I've seen in a lot of places. And as I mentioned before the break, last year South Carolina's biggest hater, quote unquote, going into the year was Brett McMurphy, who of course did not have them in his preseason top 25. He ended up being very right about that. Does have them, though, going to a bowl game this year, the Liberty Bowl taking on Houston. Now, if you look at the history of the Liberty Bowl, that suggests that South Carolina is going to be around a 6 to 7 win team this season, which would be a significant improvement. I didn't say it, which would be a significant improvement over what they did a year ago, going 4-8. I don't know if that's going to satisfy the fan base, though, even though it is getting back to a bowl game.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a significant improvement. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like that in between where, like, you may go into the season saying, I don't feel good. It's going to go like it did last year. Or you may go in saying, hey, 8 wins, 9 wins. That is a very frustrating, if that ended up playing out, that 6-win mark in the regular season. It's kind of like, okay, you're kind of just middling.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. Especially, and you have to take this into account based on the circumstances every single year with what you have coming back, with the hires that you made in the offseason. The expectation for most people, whether it's fair or not, is that you're taking a leap forward, not a step. Because, again, you proved 2 seasons ago you could be in the mix of the college football playoff and Beamer throughout the challenge in November multiple times. Like, hey, this time next year, we're going to be talked about in this top 25. We're going to be waiting to see where they have us ranked in terms of the playoff and all that kind of stuff. And, yeah, again, it's a step forward by winning potentially 2 or 3 more games, but it's not where I think anybody's placing the expectations going into the year of, all right, you're going to play Houston on January 2nd or whatever in Memphis.
Yeah, so I think we're at a weird place in college football for a number of reasons, obviously, but what it has put us at in terms of the transfer portal and NIL is also the fact that nobody really has a consensus on what proper expectations are going to be for a lot of teams. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's maybe 5 teams you can just sort of pencil in and say, hey, they're going to be a contender next year. But let's look back to last year. A team pretty much everybody agreed on at least being, a top 10 team was Penn State. And they had fired their coach by midseason. Was Clemson. They brought back more sort of returning talent that had actually played and played well than about anybody. And they had really probably the most disappointing season of Dabo's entire tenure. So I think there are going to be a lot of teams that sort of get this little, hey, this, you know what, man, this team could be a sleeper. And it's, well, you can make a case, right? Like we saw it last year. There was kind of a pretty good debate about where is South Carolina going to be, and you had some people get just throttled on social media for not having South Carolina in their top 25. Or remember, Greg McElroy came on our show and was like, I've got some concerns about this team too. It's not just all sprinkles and rainbows. And then people kind of push back on him on that. And so I think it's just going to be very difficult to, be accurate in predictions, but it's also going to be incredibly easy to take just about every team and course out, create a course where you're like, here's a path that this team could be a surprise team. You know, Josh Pate had South Carolina like kind of in his, if you squint, you can see the possibility of a playoff team there. So it makes the offseason, I don't want to say better or worse, but it makes the offseason just different to me.
Yeah, if you think about, like, before the portal era, you know, there was just not much roster movement at all. You would have a rare transfer. You would have, okay, these, you know, remember Saban's Alabama teams, okay, 8 guys are going to the NFL, and then you're losing 12 seniors, just making up the numbers. And, hey, they're bringing in this recruiting class, and it's all freshmen, maybe a JUCO guy or two sprinkled in there, and that's where your projection is. But if you have, you know, a top 10, say, and those teams are returning the bulk of their roster in the older days, quote unquote, but the pre-portal era is what we should say, you could make a pretty compelling case that, like, yeah, those teams are really good last year. Their coaching staff is mainly intact. They're bringing back most of their roster. Probably going to be pretty good again. Well, now there's way more turnover. You still got the NFL part, the eligibility part, but now you're turning over your roster from outgoing and incoming transfers, and everybody around you is doing that same thing. So it's really hard to get a handle on. You know, we were talking about this the other day. Wes and I are already getting the question, you know, what do you think South Carolina's record is going to be? I have no idea. I mean, it'll be hard to say before game 1, but we're sitting here in January and then February. We don't even have a great sense of how South Carolina's own roster is going to look. Yeah. Then you got to go to, what's Clemson look like? What are the other 15 SEC teams look like? What does the rest of the college football landscape? There's so much projection in it nowadays because of the roster turnover.
Well, and we have the same conversation with men's basketball. We're having the same conversation with baseball where, you know, you're coming off of disappointing years. And, yeah, you went out there and made significant changes in the offseason with your roster and everything that in your mind made you better. Well, guess what? Every other team in the league is trying to do the same thing, and teams towards the top don't have to make as many changes because they're already up there and already successful. So you're kind of taking swings in a lot of areas, hoping the sweeping changes make that significant a difference, but you are playing catch up compared to other teams in the league that are already farther ahead of you. Now, again, we've seen plenty of teams in college football go from being bad to decent to being really great in 1 year, in one offseason turnarounds. Carolina was kind of an example of that a couple years ago, going from 5-7 to being on the cusp of the college football playoff. So it's not impossible, but again, I think we're going to spend the next, 6 months speculating on what could be or what couldn't be based on all the changes you've made roster and staff-wise in this offseason alone.
Yeah, and we've seen the opposite as well, you know, how quickly you can kind of fall off. How do you even, you know, it used to be there's also kind of a little bit of a consensus of like, hey, man, that program's on the up. That program's on the rise. That program's building. What does that even look like at this point? What does building even mean? Like, does it mean the overall, like, culture of where you're headed appears to be in the right direction? It doesn't necessarily mean what it once did, which was, man, they've got a good young core of talent, right? It used to be, hey, they had a couple of high school recruiting classes they've put together. Once those guys are a year older, what's that group going to be? Very, very hard to look at anything past 1 year now. And I think it just changes the offseason conversation completely. I imagine there's going to be quite a bit more on South Carolina national, like from a national standpoint, in terms of like, hey, this team could surprise a lot of people, or this team's not going to surprise a lot of people. Like, I don't think there's going to be much of a consensus on where expectations should be. But as long as you got sellers, I do think you will continue to have, even with a little bit of a disappointing season last year, people say, don't completely draw a line through South Carolina in the national conversation.
Where does Brett McMurphy project South Carolina's opponents and how many of them are going to be in the college football playoff? We'll discuss that coming up next to wrap up the hour. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on The Game. All right, welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler and Chris wrapping up the hour here on your Wednesday on the Game. Wes Mitchell had to bounce out a little bit early. As I mentioned a minute ago, I know you guys have been putting out your stories in reference to your sit down with Coach Beamer. We'll start diving into some of those conversations a little bit coming up tomorrow because a lot of interesting things that have come out of that I really want to dive into. I'm sure there's a lot more in terms of future stories you guys have coming out here soon in reference to everything that you guys talked about with him here recently, right?
Yeah, I mean, definitely got some fascinating stuff from him on just, of course, looking back last season, kind of doing a very early preview of spring football this season. And just, every year we do this, one of the questions, regardless of how the season has actually gone, the previous season is, hey, what tweaks, what changes are you looking at? And so, yeah, we got into some of the stuff, obviously the very public forward-facing stuff, which are staffing changes. But there's also a lot of just small things behind the scenes, that aren't going to be put on a website. Here's our staff. It's not just those coaching changes. It's what are you tweaking in practice? What are the priorities? What types of things are you doing behind the scenes? So, yeah, we'll definitely, get into more of that as we go.
And, as I mentioned a moment ago, Beamer famously multiple times last year in November, in the midst of a bad season coming to an end, said, hey, this time next year, we're going to be talked about in the top 25. We're going to be in the discussion for playoff spots and basically kind of calling a shot. Now, last year's schedule was obviously really tough. Out of the 5 teams that made the college football playoff in the SEC, you faced 4 of them, basically almost in consecutive games there towards the end of the year. And again, this is just one projection, but if we're going to go off of what Brett McMurphy thinks the college football playoff is going to be, you're going to run into something very similar. The SEC teams he has projected in the playoff are number 2 seed Georgia, who I'm assuming would be the SEC champion, number 5 seed Texas, number 10 seed Texas A&M, and number 11 seed Oklahoma. So if you look at South Carolina's 2026 schedule, well, guess what? You're going to play Oklahoma, A&M, and Georgia in a 4-week stretch right there at the end of the season, starting on Halloween and closing out with Georgia in the penultimate week of the season. So once again, you're going to be running into what are expected to be some of the best teams in the SEC very late in the year when you're obviously, trying to piece together a season that's a step forward from a year ago. Because, again, we see opportunities for them to win games early against the Mississippi States, the Kentuckys, obviously going on the road. Florida's going to be tough, but they got a new head coach they're breaking in. But you kind of run into, with maybe the exception of Arkansas, a true gauntlet once you get past your bye week, starting with Tennessee and obviously wrapping up with Clemson at the end of the regular season.
And this is the case every year. It has been the case. Probably not going to change anytime soon. We'll see how they structure the SEC schedules going forward. But it would be nice, frankly, if we could go into a season talking about South Carolina having obviously what's still going to every year be a difficult schedule, but not one of the toughest, in the league. It seems like that's kind of where they've been lately. And it does tend to pile up on them in November because, like you said, you're adding in whatever's going to happen in the SEC from a scheduling standpoint, but they don't, get an easy out with their non-conference rival in Clemson either.
Well, and I think this is a glaring example of just how significant that extra conference game is going to be not only this year, but in years going forward. Because let's just say, for instance, because typically in that week before Clemson, you would have played, the Woffords or the SC States or something along those lines. Let's say you remove Georgia and replace it with Wofford, for example, and you play them instead. Okay, well, then you can look at what's probably 3 wins on the schedule with Kent State, Towson, and Wofford is not complete guarantees, but more likely than not games you're going to win. So then you look at the rest of your schedule and say, okay, in these other games, how can you manage to find 3 more wins to at least get yourself to bowl eligibility? A lot easier said than done, as opposed to now where you say, okay, now you've got Kent State and Towson. Shouldn't have a problem with those teams to start the season. And then you have 10 straight games against Power 4 opponents, finding a way to, if we're just talking about bowl eligibility, win at least 4 of those games to get yourself to maybe the Liberty Bowl, which again is easier said than done because as we talked about a moment ago, even the Mississippi States and Kentuckys massively overhauling their rosters this offseason, and they could be the teams that strike gold. They could be the teams that become the next Indiana and go out there and surprise the entire world. And guess what? You got them on your schedule in addition to the teams that we know are going to be good, like Alabama, like Georgia, like A&M, like Oklahoma.
Well, and so let's go back to what Wes was talking about. Josh Pate's whole, if you squint, you can see it. if you're trying to come up with, if you're trying to game out a scenario of how can South Carolina not, honestly, man, nobody wants to talk about how can you squeak out bowl eligibility. Like, nobody wants to hear that.
Yeah.
You know, how can South Carolina actually truly compete next year? Well, yes, of course, they're going to have to do it against a really strong schedule. But think about last year's team, 4-8, not even close to what you want. But they played also last season a lot of really good teams, once again. And a lot of those games were close. We were talking about fourth-quarter games, close fourth-quarter games. You know, the collapse against Texas A&M, which will be talked about for a long time, you ended up losing that game by 1 point. You absolutely should not have lost that game given the start that you had. You know, if it was close the whole way and you lost by 1, it would be viewed differently. Valiant effort, didn't finish, but it would be along those lines. That one's viewed differently because of how you started and then how you finished. Alabama, you're leading that game, you lose. Missouri, you're leading that game on the road, you lose. Even some of the Ole Miss game, you lose by 16. I was at that game. It was fairly close in the first half, pulled away. And so the issue is that the offense was so poor last year for most of the season and most of the games. It was so poor that it was just you couldn't get over the hump. The special teams, the defense, they generally did enough in games to keep you in. And you can't help but wonder, man, what if the offense was just average last year? You still would have played a tough schedule, and you could have, I would go as far as to say would have, won a few more games in there if your offense was average. Not good, average. And they were not even average last year. So my point is, if you're trying to game out, how could South Carolina improve? Well, if you're pretty good on defense again, if you're pretty good on special teams again, and you can have this offense take a pretty sizable step, you're still, again, going to be playing a really good schedule. That might be your path to, like, if you squint, you can see it. And then that's the priority goal, is to get this offense turned around.
And as much as we got sick of hearing the we're close thing, Beamer wasn't wrong, and he continues to say it anytime we hear from him in this offseason. I'm sure he said it when he sat down with you guys as well. It doesn't take sizable changes to get yourself in a different conversation a year ago. Obviously, you didn't do enough a season ago, but it's not like it's impossible, right? Because you were close in those games. You did have good defensive performances. Your special teams was good. It was just the offense that wasn't up to snuff. So, yeah, if Kendall Browse can get them back to anything respectable offensively, and defense and special teams can hold serve from what they were a year ago, you should be in the conversation to hopefully win around that 8 to 9 game mark a year ago. Easier said than done, obviously, but it's not this gargantuan climb back up the mountain like it may seem to have been coming out of the season.
Yeah, if you had gone 4-8 and all of your losses were by, like the Oklahoma, 26-7, if they were all along those lines, you would kind of be, okay, this is a higher mountain to climb. And like you said, man, that does not mean it's going to be easy, especially against this schedule. But there is a fine line between dropping a game, dropping multiple games, or going out and winning them when you play this type of schedule that they're going to face every single year.
Yep. So a lot of conversations to be had this offseason. Again, we'll get into what Wes and Chris had to say in their conversations with Coach Beamer coming up tomorrow, as well as react to what happens with baseball coming up tonight. Halftime show coming up next. Myself and Bill Gunner on your Wednesday on the Game.
All right, everyone, if you want to transform your home into a smart home, if you're interested in upgrading your home theater system, or if you want to make your entertainment room the place to be, reach out to our friends over at Integrated Media. They are your true one-stop shop for smart home installation services, new televisions, wireless speakers, solving all of your internet connectivity issues, anything that you need from a tech or audiovisual standpoint. They can do it for you at your home all around the Midlands. 803-948-8327.